to the front. No, I'm kidding. All right, so a little bit about me. I'm just an ordinary guy who landed here in Tampa back in '04 after I retired from the Army after 21 years, and kind of been here ever since. And got involved with a few different things while I was here. So right now I'm teaching for St. Pete College. I work as a defense contractor, kind of manage my own company, doing some of the same things we're talking about here. But the biggest thing is my goal is always just trying to help people understand the big picture. And this subject, as Mike just talked about previously, has a lot of different areas about it, different aspects, and there's a lot of different levels depending on where you sit relating to your company. You can be the owner, or the worker be on the keyboard, but everybody's kind of playing a role in this. So I'm going to kind of hit it from the angle of some of these things right here. Just in general, talk about the big picture of what it's all about, and kind of give you an idea of why it's so important we have to do what we're doing right now. And it's actually changing pretty much every day. They're adding more to it. So it's kind of like we say in the military, building a plane in flight. They're still kind of doing that. It's gotten a lot better, but they're still adding more things because they're realizing how many more holes need to be plugged in. This whole program is all about people getting access to defense information that shouldn't have access. And as they've realized over the years, it's that many people that said they had certain security capabilities in place, because the government says, okay, you got to have these things in place. They say, oh, yeah, we're good, we got it. Nobody was checking. And then they started realizing maybe they don't really have it, because this attack would happen, that attack would happen. And a lot of attacks that happened on the DoD side, it didn't come through the DoD, it came through a third-party vendor. And that third-party vendor, they really weren't saying, or rather doing what they were saying they were doing, which is, I plugged up all my holes. So this program came about to kind of go and double check. And like if they say you got to have a 3-strike rule when you log into a computer, let's see you do it. Log in and let's see if your 3-strike rule works. And if it doesn't, now we know where you are to help you get to where you need to be. So in a nutshell, this whole thing is about all of that, okay? So FAR is kind of what kicked this off for us, which is the Federal Acquisition Regulation. And they started with something called FCI, which is Federal Contract Information. And that was the first phase of this, because CMMC, which we'll talk more about, has 3 phases, and we'll talk about those 3 phases. But this was the first phase to kind of get things going to where, again, those vendors, those companies realize that, hey, you have these requirements that you have to meet to cover our information, as in Department of Defense, government as a whole. So that's how we kind of moved into the scheme of using this program and growing the program to make it even more efficient than this. So that's the FAR piece, which starts off at CMC Level 1. So and these are the 15 various controls that FAR kind of required companies to kind of maintain. For example, like monitor, control, protect organizational communication. Well, there's a whole lot that still goes with those 15 primary areas, this task that also go with it. So if they were doing these things, at least they have something. A lot of them weren't even doing this. So that's where it became really difficult. And as we go through this, it also becomes more costly. And that's where some of the problems fall in today, because it's a requirement you have to have, depending on the type of information. So right here, it doesn't even relate to CUI, which we'll talk about, control and classified information, but it's still government information. So it needs to be maintained and taken care of. Oh, clicker, are you clicking? There we go. So then we moved into the CUI, which is basically where we are today. Now, what CUI data is, it's not top secret, it's not secret, it's one of those information that is not necessarily deemed to be out in the public, but if it did, it won't bring a country down. But it's still information that shouldn't get out. It should be maintained properly. So as you see right here, it's laws, regulation, government-wide policies that kind of make us control these things. So when you hear CUI, 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 it's all about this type of information that whoever the organization is, it can be a small vendor, mom and pop, it could be a General Dynamics. The rules are the same across the board for everybody. So this really helped us create a standard, because there really wasn't a standard in place, and there was no way of verifying that that standard was being maintained properly. So that's how we got into CUI. Now, the DFARS came from the FAR, and the DFARS is really Department of Defense's breakoff of, okay, here's FAR, you say I need to do this, well, I'll create my piece of it for all the people that come up under me. And that's where the DFARS came from. So 712 was kind of the first one to introduce NIST 800-171. And again, safeguard of incident reporting. So that basically means, well, okay, I'm company X. I have an incident. Hacker may have gotten into something. It happens, okay. But I don't report that. I just kind of keep it in the house, shove it up under the rug. Nobody will ever know. But this kind of changed that to basically say, okay, hey, if you're going to do this, maintain our stuff, we need to know within 72 hours if there was something that took place. Now, that doesn't mean you may fix it in 72 hours, but at least we know. So if we need to cut off something temporarily so you can take care of that, we'll be able to do that. Won't be a problem. But if they don't tell us, that's when it becomes a big problem. Because it can also, as you know, people pivot and move in different directions from the negative side, and that's how they get into the big companies. So the DIB that you hear here is the Defense Information Base. And what that is, that makes up pretty much most of, well, it's all of the vendors that DoD as a whole works with. That could be from a small company to a big company that makes screws for a tank. It doesn't really matter. But that's the stuff that needs to be protected, because in the wrong hands, that could be an issue for our country as a whole. So then we moved into the next piece, and that's why you see, again, this is where handling CUI comes in from some contractors. So if I'm a prime, like Lockheed Martin or one of the other big ones here in the area, I will sub out certain things, because most companies as a whole, as you just heard, even when we were talking about through the news, you hear about Ford and, you know, tariffs and all these great things, but nothing's made everything in one place. Half is here, half is there, and these are all these subcontractors that are contributing to the whole. So just like I said before, when you get a vehicle, you got pieces from all over the world, and those little companies play a big role in making it work. So that's why we had to kind of control that. So you see here in 719 of the DFARS, assessment requirements. So they came up with these requirements that says, okay, now that we know it's not being done, and now that we know we need to kind of set up some way to make sure it's being done, we have to lay out what we want done. And that's where these requirements come from. So SP 800-171 is what they put in place to break down these various requirements. And there's 110 of them. We'll talk about them. And then there's something right here called SPURS, which is Supply Performance Risk System. That's where you, as in Company A, subcontractor, have to report to show that you meet these requirements for the 110 controls. And any DoD company who wants to use a vendor in the supply chain can go in and look in that SPURS, says, okay, I want to hire Joe's airplane. Great. Is Joe meeting the requirement met by this requirement here of 800-171? And if he does, great. We can work with him. If he doesn't, not so much. He needs to get up to speed so we can work with him. So that's what all that's about. And then as you see right here at the bottom, it says assessment scores must be current, not more than 3 years old. Well, yes. So that means triannually you have to get reassessed, which is fair, because as we all know, technology changes every day. So 9 times out of 10, every year you're left behind somewhere. And there may be new things, AI, new things that are coming out that you're now using and incorporating in your company, which is not a bad thing, but it hasn't been assessed. So if you do your own internal assessment, at least every year, then every 3 years, we can get an authorized agency to come in and do a full assessment for you. Then we update your SPURS again, and everybody's good. And we just keep moving on. That's the game plan. So here is 720. This came later. And basically what it says gives DoD the right to assess contracted facilities and systems for assessments. So now this has kind of become more of like the law type of thing of, hey, we said here's what needs to be done. We said you can kind of do your own self-assessment, and we'll kind of work with that first. But now we need to make sure. So this is what gives us the ability to say, hey, we need to make sure you're being assessed. And that's what the Spurs comes in at, and that's what I was telling you about the scores. And basically what happens is, once that assessment's done, like I said, you meet the score, you're good, we can work with you. And then we came out recently with the 721 rule, CMMC requirements. And again, you're looking at the Cybersecurity Maturity Model certification. So now you have the ability, because prior to all that, there really wasn't a certification. You were just being assessed by yourself first, if you're doing a self-assessment, and then you were being assessed by a organization that DoD has approved to come out, take a look at you, and says, yeah, they're good, and update your scores. 7021 came out, and now it's official that we have agencies, C3PAOs, we'll talk about those guys in a sec, and they can come out representing DoD and says, yes, I've done a full assessment on this company, they met all the requirements, and I can give them a certificate. Well, that's saying that you are now CMMC certified as Company A. So right off the bat, carrying that acceptance of being certified, they already know, okay, if you're certified, you're good. We can work with you. If you're not, you got to figure out how do I get there. And that's where the rub comes in. Because getting there may not be as easy as you think. Some companies may already have an infrastructure in place, people, some may not. And that's where the problem is, because this isn't cheap. And I'll just tell you right off the bat, it's not cheap. It's more costly if you don't have anything. And even if you have a third-party vendor, like an MSP, then that's great. They're handling all of your SharePoint, your email and everything. But guess what? If they're using CUI in that stream of data flowing up and down, they also have to be certified, at least for FedRAMP. So there again is another cost. Because I hate to break it down, but as you guys all know, everything's about money when it comes to getting to a certain standard. And either you have it now or you don't. But there's also some parts in there you have to realize that if you don't have it, fine. You now have to figure out how you're going to get it. But it may not be to the full degree you think you need it. As in, I may not need an entire enterprise of 500 machines or 2,500 machines all doing CUI, because they're not. I may only have like 10 people actually doing something like that, working contracts with the government or doing something like that. So why am I paying for all these other people to have that access? That's pretty costly. And oh, by the way, now all of that needs to be assessed. Not that one enclave that would be a lot easier to work with and less costly, so I can still do business. So these are some of the pieces of really what makes up 171. Rev 2 is what we're using right now. Rev 3 is already out, but we're not using it, but we will be shortly, I'm soon, probably another 6 months. But there's 110 requirements, and those are 110 controls that come with 171. 171 Alpha breaks down those 110 controls, but under each control are tasks, or called objectives. And there are actually 320 objectives. So that means one task can have like 5 objectives tied to it. You have to meet all 5 objectives to meet that one control. There again goes back to the problem. How are we going to do that? It's only me and the guy who plays with the server. Right? And it happens. So they have to figure out, okay, do we outsource this? Do we get a managed service provider? Maybe. But maybe we can't. Now, not to say, keep in mind, not every DoD contract has CUI. First of all, not everyone does. Going back to whoever the core is, your contracting officer, that you do the contract with, they can tell you you will be managing were using CUI data. And if you're not, you're okay. I mean, yeah, you still have to secure your environment, but you don't have to worry about, for that particular contract, having CUI to have to worry about. But they break it down in these areas. So here's how we get into the frameworks, because it's considered as a framework. Like it says right here, the CMMC framework consists of security requirements from 800-171, protecting unclassified information, and non-federal system organizations. That means they're not tied to the Department of Defense. So, because DoD's taking care of their own piece. This is the people working with DoD as a subcontractor. This 800-172 enhances security requirements for protecting and control unclassified information. That is also out. And we're going to talk about the levels of level 1, level 2, level 3, and how they all kind of play a role in there. And like I said, the framework is originally organized into domains, and we'll talk about those domains, which map directly to the regulation for level 1, 2, and 3. So here we are. These are your levels. And each level brings something different. So when we're talking about the FCI in the FAR, right here, that's a small amount of controls, 15, actually it's about 17 really, but just basic. And annual assessment, meaning I can take my company, and if I'm just using that type of information, I can do a self-assessment, go through all of those controls, checklists, and put that into SPURS, and I'm good. But if I want to do level 2, which is where 800-171 comes in at, I got to do more, 110. So that's where those 110 controls come from. And notice it says triannually by a C3PAO. That is a certified organization that has been given a right, they've gotten the certification themselves as a company, to go out and certify you or your company. And they're the only ones authorized to do it. DoD kind of crowned them as, you're good, and now you can go and check sure and make sure other people are good as well. So then you have level 3, which we're not there yet, but we're getting there real soon. And that has even more requirements derived from 172. And we'll break down how many different controls are there too. That's also triannual. So that means every year I have to do a self-assessment or have a third party come in and do assessment. You may have someone just do a gap analysis of all of your controls, see where you stand, and see where your gaps are. Because you may have 70% done. But then those other 30%, you got to figure out how you're going to fill those gaps. When you start getting into level 3, this is where we're looking at the bigger stuff, like tanks and airplanes and all those big, heavy enterprise type of things. That's why it's a little bit more. We're not there yet, but it's coming. So here's the basic levels. Level 1, of course, they call it basic. Like it says, security requirements for protecting the FCI data, 17 basic requirements from 171. And at this level, contractors with minimal exposure to CUI. So that means very, very little or maybe none at all. And that's okay. Level 2, you move into the CUI. They call that the intermediate. Because now you're starting to work with more of the data that needs to be protected. So you got to meet those controls. And like I said, this level requires third-party audits, focusing on protecting that sensitive information. And that's where those C3PAOs I was telling you about come in. And then you have the last one at the bottom, level 3. And this one again says this level covers the enhanced security requirements. And it's based on 131 requirements from 171, 172, plus 35 additional. So there's a lot more. And that's because, like I said, it may be heavy-duty information like your diagrams or blueprints for something major, a facility or something that they're working with. So you got to have a little more intense scrutiny from a control side. Nice song. All right, so here's another look at it as far as the 171, 172, as far as how they differ. So as you can see, 71 is protect and control unclassified information. 72 is the enhancement for that. On the applicability, non-federal system organizations. On 72, organizations dealing with U.S. and Department of Defense. So, and again, these are other variables to kind of tie into those. Just kind of showing you a little bit of the difference between the two. And you guys will get all these slides and everything at the end of the conference. That's from all the talks. So if you don't get the pictures, no big deal. These are the control families that make up 171. And as you can see, there are several different ones here. You got access control. Anyone give me an idea of what an access control can be? Anybody? Active Directory. How's Active Directory access control? Okay. Yeah, you're correct. Anybody else? Any other ideas? Server room? Yeah, that's a physical access, right? So access control is just not the machines, it's the physical. Because as you know, in IT, or more or less cyber, we have three things we already focus on. It's going to be either technical control, physical control, or an administrative control. An administrative will be policies, procedures, those type of things. So all of that plays a role in all of these, which is why some things, if you go to, let's say I'm going to go to a GCC High with Microsoft, and they're going to protect a lot of my stuff for me, that's great. But they can't protect the physical stuff. So we still need to get eyes on that to make sure you're doing it right. And then we can say, yep, you're good, box check. So we can inherit some things from Microsoft because they've already gotten certified, gone through the FedRAMP process. But the rest we have to kind of figure out and make sure we cover it ourselves. So these are the families. And this kind of moves into the 32 and 48 CFR. And these are basically rules that came down, and again, they are federal regulations. So 32 CFR sets the rule for the program itself. It's setting the tone for the program, defining specific requirements for compliance as well as policies for assessments. The policy also designates the Cyber AB. Now, that organization I was telling you about that kind of authorizes these C3PAO folks to come and do that certification, they fall through Cyber AB. DoD says, hey, we're not going to run this. We'll tag this company or organization, Cyber AB, and you run that aspect, and then you certify the right companies. Once they get certified, and then go certify other people. So that's where that comes in. Then 48 CFR enforces these requirements within the procurement process, and that's when, again, we're going to get stuff from supply chain. So for CMC, the rules mandates that the contractor must be CMC certified, except the award of new defense contracts. So if they're going to do business, they got to get certified. And we're at that point right now because first 32 CFR came out. 48 CFR is like knocking right on the door right now. It'll be out soon to say, I can put that in my contract, and you have to follow it. And if you can't meet that requirement, we can't do business. And that's okay. But at least you know as a vendor, supplier, where you stand. And now you know what you need to do to hopefully get to where you can. Now, unfortunately, a lot of people are going to lose a lot of money because they've had contracts previously with DoD, and they weren't really like putting a hammer down. So they're kind of, just doing business as it goes. But now they are. And if they stipulate that into your contract, you have to meet that requirement, meaning those SPURS scores we talked about, and we'll look at that in a little bit more in depth, that has to be 110. And if it's not, you have a certain amount of time to make sure it is once that assessor does the assessment. And if it isn't, then we go back, start all over again, try to figure out how we can get it there, and then have someone come back out and take another look at us. Why is this costly, like I told you in the very beginning? It's expensive to either get it and maintain it. But once you get it, all you have to do is continuous monitoring and monitor it and make sure what you think is right is still right. That's a little less costly. So it's one of those, unfortunately, I hate to say it, it's pay me now, you pay me later. But there is going to be somebody paying somebody along the way because you lose business if you don't meet the requirements. But keep in mind, not everything in DoD has CUI data, so there's still contracts out there for it. Like whoever's going to fund the contract for the toilet paper in the gym, I really doubt that's CUI. It's government contract, right? Those type of things still exist. But again, if you want some of the larger ones, you're going to have to do the work. Okay, these are the folks that kind of put everything together. The CMC ecosystem is what they call it. And Cyber AB, who we just talked about, they were tagged, the roles would depend on them to kind of put the program together to make this successful. So throughout the program, you had a couple of different levels. Over here, you have RPOs, which is Registered Practitioner Organizations, and kind of help with that piece. And these people right here, the RPs, practitioners, help support them. They are the front end, meaning you can have an RP come in and do a gap analysis, do a pre-assessment for you, as in like the actual assessors coming through to take a look at you. So now you got an idea of how do I look. Some people call it a mock assessment. They can do all that for you. Then, if everything's good, you can have one of these people right here that work for the C3PAO, who's been authorized to do the work, to come out. See, these are C3PAOs down here. These are instructors, rather, I'm sorry. And they can come out and do the assessment for you. They work for these guys. The C3PAO, which is a CMMC third-party assessment organization. Right now, we're close to about 100 C3PAOs, give or take, globally. You got it, right? So what does that mean? That means, if I want to get on the list to get looked at, I need to do that like now, because they may not even see me until December. Because you got a little bit supporting a whole lot. Now, don't get me wrong, it's growing by the day. There's more assessors coming on by the day because the program is actually picking up more speed. This isn't going away, though. That's where one of those things, you have to get it there. Once you get it there, you have to maintain it. But at the same time, if you have it, you're open to any business you want to do, which is good. So you got a couple of different groups. You got these people over here who are the people who create the training materials. Then you have over here the instructors. And they're now merging into where there was a provisional instructor. It's all merging now into just one instructor set. Then over here you have the licensed partners. So that would be like a company that you go to that's been authorized by these folks to teach. And then the instructors will do the teaching for you. And then you have the provisional assessors, which kind of isn't the same anymore. It's just an assessor now. You have a lead assessor, which is the one that's going to be in charge of the team that's going to come out and do your actual assessment for you. Now, here's the kicker. When they come out, these folks right here, C3PAO, they're coming one time. You got one shot. As in, they're not going to be there to tell you, you got a couple of policies missing. And they just tell you, okay, your policy on log management. Okay, all right, don't have a policy. They can't tell you what goes in there or how to do it. Because they're not there to teach. They're there to assess. Which is why it behooves most companies that want to finally get to the certified level through the C3PAO to have a pre-assessment done by another company, because this company, whoever the C3PAO is, been authorized, they cannot do an assessment, as in the pre-assessment side of it. You can't do both. You can't do the pre-assessment and then come back and do the assessment, because that's illegal, because you can't check your own work. That make sense? So that's why you have a lot of companies that do pre-assessments, and then another company will come in and do the assessment. And that's how the program works. This is just a scale of how you get through the various levels of certification in the program. And again, you can move at any rate you want, but this is kind of designed, again, by Cyber AB of the steps you get to the assessor side. Now, here's the C3PAO, the folks we were talking about. These guys right here are huge in the picture of certifying companies. They've all been certified. They've gone through the whole process. They had to go through what's called a DIBCAC, which is more or less the government itself inspecting them and assessing them. And once they got the green light, now they can go and do the same thing for all these other companies. And like I said, the primary mission of Cyber AB, who's the umbrella organization, authorize and accredit that C3PAO. So that's what they do. And the government says, yes, you are the company, organization to manage the program to do all these things. And like I said, this DIB, Defense Information Base, everything's all about that. Protecting the supply chain that's inside the DIP. Now, this piece right here is just kind of showing you what happens. So as you can see here at the very bottom, the first year, if I'm a level 2, I can do a self-assessment. Okay, great. So I've gone through and done a gap analysis, have another company come in and do a pre-assessment for me, and I can count that as my self-assessment. Now I have to have, of course, my system security plan and all these other documents we'll talk about later that kind of is required to go into that SPURS that I was saying that you got to upload that 110 score. You got to have supporting documentation. So all that's been done, and that's what they're talking about here. So you did it, everything's good, did the gap analysis, completed the project, and ultimately you're good for doing self-assessment 1 year. Now, that does not get you CUI contracts, though, because you still have to go through the official C3PO certification for the CUI contract. But if you were just granted the certification that you have your C3PO certification, this is you right here. You got checked out, you're level 2, everything's good, you got approved, you got tagged as I am now certified. You can run that banner on your web page for your company, which is great, because now people know that you can be worked with for DoD. And you're good for 3 years. Now, after that 3 years, you renew that every 3 years. But every year, you got to do this, a self-assessment. Why is that important? Like I said earlier, is because things change, your company changes, people change. So you need to make sure you're current on everything you're saying is still right, because every year you have to put that back into your SPURS score. Whether you're a certified company or not, that certification is good for 3 years. But if your score isn't maintained as you do your annual self-assessment, you could fall out of being certified. Going back to, once you get there, continuous monitoring, continuous improvement helps keep you there. So far, so good? Awesome. Okay. All right, so this is the SPURS stuff I keep talking about. Supply Performance Risk System. And this is a system that we said back in our DFARS realm that we have to have to record the 110 score by whatever organization decides to want to do business. And this is a bad picture of it. It's kind of a picture of how you put data in. You put in some other information like your organization ID and some other things that go into there. And this is what someone in the DoD can go into and look and say, oh, okay, yeah, they're good. I see 110, they got certified. We're great. We can work with those guys. Then right below it, they see somebody that's 85. Not there quite yet, so next slide. I mean, what can you do, right? All right, so like I said, the SPURS score is essentially a numerical grade that gets entered into that DoD system. And that's what's used to be monitored to verify the company. And like I said, SPURS score will fall somewhere in between a minus 203. Ultimate score is 110. So what does that mean? It means that when you first do your checklist of 800, 171 alpha, go through all those controls, all those tasks. After you do all that, you ultimately should get to 110. You start at minus 203. And there's a category from 5 to 3 to 1 scoring of the various objectives that dictate how you get to 110. So that's how you get to that point. You have to be able to answer all those objectives and the subtasks, or various objects, rather, that go with it. And if you do, you're good. And if you're not there, again, you're aware of what's going on and what's wrong. Because you may not have the money to get there in the next 6 months. You just did your annual budget. So you got to budget that for next year or find some extra money somewhere, which is kind of hard to do nowadays, right? This is under a mattress somewhere, right? So that's where it falls. And again, there are 110 controls, maximum SPURS score is 110 out of 14 families. 5 steps to CMC readiness. And this is the readiness aspect of I need to get going, I need to get this started, I need to get looked at, and I need to get my score. So you start preparing, like it says here, regular standard, and you want to find out, it's kind of like my buddy Mike just talked about earlier, you got to figure out how to scope what you are actually working with. That could vary. You may, like I said earlier, you may think your entire enterprise of 500, 2,500 people needs CUI access. They may not. They just may need a small slice of that, which is much easier to get assessed and certified the entire network. Does that make sense? And that's one of the biggest pieces right now a lot of people are struggling with is, what am I using right now? Who is touching my CUI? So if I am using a MSP, do they store that for me in AWS in the S3 bucket somewhere? Maybe. Do they see it? Maybe. Do they do backups? So that means they also have to be approved. If they're not, and here's the downside, and unfortunately it's happened to a lot of people, if your company's working on an MSP right now and they're not certified, you won't get certified. Their not having it affects you having it. So that means you got to go find another MSP that's already certified to start working with. Because if you inherit controls from them, they have to meet the same requirements that you have to meet. It's like I was saying earlier, they may be able to come down when you do your assessment, because they have to be there for it. It's, oh yeah, here's how we do our patching. We run our patches. We run vulnerability scans every Thursday. We patch every Monday. Okay, how long you keep your logs? Not sure. And the book tells you how long to keep the logs. So if they're not keeping your logs, then you just fail. Because you don't know how long they're keeping your logs. You never did a service level agreement with them from the very beginning. We got that contract, SLA, specifying, here's what I need to be able to do as your customer MSP. And if you can't meet that requirement for me, I can't work with you. Because when I get assessed or inspected, they're going to ask me these questions. I need to be able to say, yeah, I can go in and look at the logs myself from my Amazon supporting MSP, and I can show you exactly how often they've done it. Or they can kick your report out and show them what they did. This is more or less don't tell, show. Because when an assessor comes through, they're going to ask you for supporting documentations, artifacts, to answer the mail on all these things I'm talking about. And if that MSP cannot do it, then that's the wrong MSP. And don't get me wrong, there's been some strong relationships over the years that people have built with their MSP. Because you're a small company, you don't have the manpower to handle all that stuff, which is fine. But if you're going to do CUI, they're not the ones. So keep it in mind, it's strictly business, nothing personal, right? Because you want to keep doing business. All right, preparing for the CMMC audit. Some things I was talking about, figure out if you're going to do level 1, level 2. And again, most companies are going to probably do level 2. And it's always good, if you're not, to still strive to get to level 2. Because you want to have as many options as you can as a business owner. Because you have now a diverse capability to be able to pull in more income. So as you go through all that, and then you submit your CMMC assessment. So you can put a self-assessment in there if you got your gap analysis or pre-assessment into your SPURS. You have your SSP, System Security Plan. Now that System Security Plan breaks down 110 controls. And it says in there how you're going to answer each one of those controls. Now, yes, you can stubby pencil it. It'll work, but there are templates out there for it. But most people now have some type of governance risk management system that they use, automated. They can go in and put in information, and it spits out their SSP form, which makes it also easier to go in and tweak it every 90 days, every 6 months. And you may just grab, 10 controls and go back and look at them and says, okay, are we still good on these? Is it still good? Update it, and you'll be prepared. So by the time you get your annual for your self-assessment, you've already done it. Which means by the time you get to your triannual every 3 years, you've already done it. And that's the best recommendation to take care of it, because the problem is, as we all know, life, we get busy, business starts growing, people start leaving, and now you're stuck. Because the same people you had to get you there aren't there anymore. So that's your responsibility as a business owner to make sure you take care of that. And then like it says, okay, you put it into the portal. If you don't have the ability to handle a certain control, example, let's say you have a Unix system or you're running Red Hat and it's a system as a whole. You don't have a patch because they haven't put it out yet. Not your fault. You recognize it and realize it. So you put it on this thing called a Plan of Action and Milestones, a POAM. That POAM says, hey, stakeholder, risk owner, here's something we got a problem with. Are you okay with that? Sure. How long is it going to take you to fix it? Company says they'll have something out in the next 6 months. Great. I'll put 6 months on the POAM. That's my window. If an assessor comes back and says, hey, you had a POAM here for 6 months, and it really probably won't be that long, but did you close it? I don't know. We just did it when we did the assessment. And you got to make sure you stay on top of this. And that's the biggest issue because it will run away from you if you don't. Because you're going to get assessed again, whether you like it or not, if you decide that's the route you want to go. Not a bad thing. You just have to stay on top of it. All right. What do I need to do to be compliant? These things right here kind of fall into play. We already talked about it. 171, 171 alpha, meeting that 14 control families, any objectives. How much does it cost? That's not an easy question to answer because one person's cost may not be the same as another person. Example, you have a company here in Tampa, small company. They have an MSP that supports them, and they do average business, and they don't have a really large footprint. They would probably be a little less, depending on what they have in their infrastructure, than a company that has 3 different organizations set up in 3 different places. Because now you got to secure all 3. Or if it's an enterprise that the domain is managing, you secure a domain, hopefully you'll secure those boxes. But the physical aspect of it still needs to be looked at each one of those sites. So that's where the cost comes in. Because the assessors are going to charge you by the hour or per contract, however you set it up, for however big you may be. And like I said, it could vary. It just depends on. So that goes back to the point of if you can reduce your footprint of the type of area that you need to use CUIN, that reduces your costs in most cases. All right? So what are the steps? These are the steps here. We talked about them already. And in the end, you'll get certified. These are just some of the resources. There are more. And if you have any questions, I'll be glad to help you. And my company also does free assessments and help out with gap analysis as well. But the biggest piece, yes, sir. Yeah. There? Yeah, no problem. And these are just general questions. There's always more questions. But I tried to hit the hot topics that most people are concerned about. How much does it cost? How long can I be certified? All those type of things. Yes, sir. So, again, every organization is different because there are some automated capabilities tied to track your POAM. And it can say, it's kind of like a notification on your phone, on a calendar. Hey, this event's coming up. Somewhat like that. But others may not have that capability. So you may have to kind of manage it manually. And you may only have like 4 or 5 items on the POAM. But someone has to maintain that. And then someone has to go back and says, hey, when was that closed out? So, and there's a process when you go through the actual certification. They give you a little bit of time to do it, but it's not a lot. Small amount of time, because if you don't get it done, you got to come back, go to the back of the line, and start all over again. Yes, sir. Yes, it does. Yeah, it does. Yeah. A lot of them, so you got to look at it from a governance, risk, and compliance perspective. All of them are pretty much doing the same thing. They label them different numbers, but, a lock is a lock. Bollards are bollards. Everybody know what bollards are? I'm sorry if you don't. Those little flower pots in front of Target that you'll hit that before the store. Those are bollards. So yeah, most of them are, but most have a mapping. They can help you out. I don't have a mapping source on this one, but I can get you one. Yeah. Yeah, they do. Yeah, they're really good to use. Yes, correct. Yeah, but Compliance Forge is a really good site to go hit. And this stuff's free. No, it's free. Yeah. Yeah, it's like a heat map. They've already done that and given out to everybody. Yeah. Yeah, yes, sir. If it affects the scope of your work that you're doing CUI in. If that enclave, let's say you have an enclave for CUI, if it doesn't alter, you're still good. You can add additional services on the backside, but if it affects the way the data flows with CUI, you're gonna have to get reassessed. Another piece too, this is where managed service providers really like this, because if you change MSPs, you have to get reassessed. That means everything you went through for that first one, you gotta go through all that again for this new one. Pray, right? But yeah, that's the reality. So that's why I said, whomever's gonna be involved with this program, you really need someone in your organization that's keeping up with it and the changes and monitoring, how often these things are being looked at as far as these various controls, because it can run away from you real quick. And before you know it, you're at renewal time, and now you have a big piece of money you have to put out because you haven't sustained what you started with. Anybody else have any questions? Yes, sir. Right, it's coming. Right. Correct. Yeah. Well, so that's what the book says. But what the noise on the street is, it may be sooner because of the way the infrastructure is changing in Washington. And now that Kathy Arrington's back in the lead of it, it's going to be a lot of changes. Now, that may not be all bad, but you still got to kind of look at it from the aspect, if it does come in the next 8 to 10 months, how do I look? They probably will do a slow roll, but it may depend on the contractor as well. Because the contractor does not have to put that in there today. But I can promise you by August, they will. And then that becomes part of the issue. Go ahead, Mike. Yes. Yes. Mm. Yeah. Correct. So it's kind of like a dark hole you can fall into. Right. And that's best guess, and because it's hard to say from where we sit right now, but it is coming. But you got to kind of just be ready. That's the best you got right now. Any other questions? All right, folks, thank you so much. I appreciate you taking time to hang out with me.